Greetings to you as we continue with the uh, wonderful story of Ruth. Today, Ruth chapter 3. Now, of course, there's some stuff here which is difficult in that it's culturally very, very different from the world we live in, most of us. If you're part of the Western world, as I am, so called, which obviously includes Europe and most of Europe, uh, North America, uh, Australia, New Zealand, and a few other places, the Western world, then some of the cultural references and behaviours in Ruth are just quite alien. But we have clues to them because we have the five books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And in those books, in all of them actually, but particularly in Leviticus and in Exodus as well, we have some of the background setting the scene for the culture, the behaviors, the assumptions that lie behind this story. And don't forget that Ruth is set, we don't know exactly, but 100 to 200 years after the giving of the commandments through Moses. So it's not a huge long time away. The commandments are very, very ancient history for us, not just the 10, but the lesser rules about uh, the way Israel as a land was to be governed after the people went in and how civil life was to work. All those rules were not so distant for them. Well, we've had the story so far. Um, Ruth has been widowed, a Moabite young woman, and she's come to Israel, to Bethlehem, with her mother-in-law, Naomi, and she's gone out as one of the very poor, following the reapers in the fields, gleaning, picking up what was left over. But the owner of the fields, Boaz, who is in some way related to her mother-in-law Naomi, has spotted her and been kind to her and protected her and made sure that she is able to exercise the rights that the poor had according to Exodus and Leviticus to glean in the fields. I'm sure those would have been exercised well in some owners' fields and not well in other owners' fields. There wasn't a police force or any sort of judiciary as we know it, and there wasn't always someone to guarantee the rights of the poor and so on. But she was protected by Boaz, and she goes back and tells Naomi all about this, and Naomi, you can sort of see a glint in her eyes, um, because partly Ruth is being protected, but partly Naomi has said in verse 20 of chapter 2, the man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin. And we're getting there into one or two very small but very important words in the Jewish culture, which is still seen actually in some bits of Middle Eastern culture even today. The concept of relatives are much more than we're used to. And you meet people in Middle Eastern countries and you ask them about their cousins, which is the word for relative rather than strict cousin in the biological sense as we would have. And people have lots and lots of cousins or relatives, far more than Westerners normally would at all. But he is one of the nearest ones. And for Naomi, this is significant. She clearly knows her Old Testament scriptures, her Leviticus, Exodus scriptures. At least she knows the culture which is based on them. Ruth from Moab won't get all of this at all. But for Naomi, there's real hope in all this. Hope for Ruth, hope for Naomi, hope for Naomi's husband, uh, Marlon. Remember Marlon and Kilion, the two sons of Naomi who died in Moab? Well, we're told in chapter 4, verse 10, that Ruth was the wife of Marlon. And Marlon, of course, was the son of Elimelech. And the male line in that family has died out. And can the name, which was held normally in the male line, be preserved? Now, this is hugely important to Jewish people and to many Middle Eastern people. The name, preserving the name. Now, of course, it's the fortunes as well, and it's property that Elimelech had in Bethlehem before he fled to Moab because of famine. Uh, Property was held and was honored and belonged to a family and a line in perpetuity, unless they very consciously sold it to others, which wasn't always encouraged. Your property and your name were with you and they went on to your descendants. And normally through the male line, no, women weren't at all inactive in the process, as we see with Naomi and various other stories in the earlier part of the Old Testament, where um, unmarried daughters were able to receive inheritance. Uh, so don't think women were completely ignored, but inheritance went through the male line, and particularly the name, which was partly to do with the land. It was to do with the tribal and the clan belonging, and it was very important. If you've ever been to or heard of the uh, wonderful but dreadful Holocaust memorial in Jerusalem, a vast place, very beautifully done, telling horrible, terrible stories. It's called Yad Vashem, which means in Hebrew a memorial and a name to the Jewish people reflecting on the Holocaust or living in the light of the Holocaust, a memorial to the 6 million Jews and others who died was more than important. It was absolutely necessary, but it wasn't just a memorial, it was a name. It was to restore the name, to maintain the name, to keep the name alive, to keep the name in the public records. And so in that terrible place, Yad Vashem, are recorded all the names of the 6 million Jewish people who were killed during that time, as well as other names and other bits of history and bits of the story. But preserving the name matters. And here, that was part of the whole thing about kin and tribe and relatives sharing a name. They were sons of, or grandsons of, or grandchildren, or great grandchildren of a name. It's why they kept their genealogies. It's why, towards the beginning of Matthew and Luke, you have genealogies of Jesus. The name, the ancestry, the line really mattered to those people more than it often does to us. And Naomi has seen Boaz as one of our nearest kin. And that means it's one who, in the laws of Moses, has the right to redeem the name, to buy back part of his family that's fallen into hard times or debts. If necessary, that might mean paying off the debts, but it would restore the name. It would, if you like, in our terms, clear the bankruptcy. fully and totally, and it would restore the family and take away the shame of being widow or orphan. Now that shouldn't be a shame. It isn't a shame in the sense of holding any blame, but the widow and the orphan doesn't have a name and doesn't usually have an inheritance unless an adult male of the family claims it back for them. A next of kin or nearest of kin with the right to redeem. And this little word, sometimes translated in the Bible I'm reading, kinsman, sometimes relative, sometimes next of kin, sometimes kinsman, redeemer. You'll find all sorts of different translations for this little Hebrew word. They have the right to redeem. Similar to the story that the Pharisees raised with Jesus about the seven brothers who uh, one after another married the same woman and died, and um, who would be married to whom in heaven. And Jesus says, you know, neither the scriptures nor the power of God. But what they're doing is picking up on this possibility and responsibility sometimes of the next of kin to maintain the name and the family line as such an important thing. Now, Christians, we receive a new name. We receive uh, in baptism the name, the mark of Jesus, our Lord, our Savior, our King, our God. And receiving a new name is a huge thing. Theologically, biblically, it gives us a new citizenship in heaven and so on. And this is part of the background to that, but that isn't the point of the story here. You can read the story in chapter 3. It's delightful and perplexing. Naomi sends Ruth back to Boaz, verse 2, our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you've been working. Go wash and anoint yourself, put on your best clothes, go down to the threshing floor. Do not make yourself known to the man till he's finished eating and drinking. Evening, day's work is finished. Eat, drink, sleep. And sleep, as it were, on the job, sleep at work, sleep on the threshing floor, because this is his business and his livelihood. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. All that you say, I will do. Ruth is an amazing young woman. Uncover his feet and lie down. Well, a reasonably well-off person would have a cloak and a blanket with which he would wear in the cold in the daytime. It wouldn't be cold in harvest time, but with which he'd cover himself at night, wherever he was. Now, if he was in a rich house, he might have clothes specifically and only for bed coverings. But for many normal people, their outdoor cloak was their cooler weather cloak was their bed covering, whichever it is. And we get a sense later that it's something that's available, something that's extra. But he's got his cloak there, he's covered with his cloak. Uncover his feet and lie down. Cloak would be a generous covering, and he wouldn't be naked under it. He'd have tunic and so on under it. But uncover his feet, lift the blanket from the bottom of the bed. It isn't a bed, it's the floor, and lie down at his feet. Lie down beneath, cover yourself, in other words, with the blanket that was over his feet. Lift it, get yourself under it, and lie down beneath his feet. That's what Naomi is telling Ruth to do. She does that and does precisely that. And she comes stealthily and uncovers his feet and lies down. This is after he's fallen asleep. At midnight he was startled, turned over, and lying at his feet, a woman. It's dark, no electric light, and so on. Who are you? I'm Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin. That is where the culture is a million miles from our own. She's claiming kinship, which means, at the very least, protection. Spread your cloak over me. Uh, Let me get warm from your cloak. I'm just lying at your feet, and the cloak is sort of half over me and half not. I'm not pulling it off you, but protect me. Give me warmth. Give me care. She's not flaunting herself, throwing herself at him sexually. And she's, on name is instruction, claiming kinship, a next of kin or nearest kin, near kin. I've come for your protection because you are next of kin. Well, not next of kin to Ruth, but next of kin to Naomi because he was a relative of Elimelech, Naomi's dead husband. But he was potentially in the role of protector, and she's asking for his protection. He says, May you be blessed by the Lord. This is verse 10, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You've not gone after young men, poor or rich. Now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I'll do for you all that you ask, for all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. It's hard for some people in the West to read this as innocent of sexual misdemeanor in any way. He chooses not to abuse her, and she trusts him. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. Remain this night. Some of the Jewish commentators go at great length about remain this night. Stay in this place of safety and security overnight. Stay with me. I'm not driving you away, but neither am I going to take advantage of you or claim you for the night. Remain, be safe, stay here this night. There's another more closely related than I. Uh, I'm not going to take advantage of you. You're safe here. Stay here. And in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you good, let him do it. If there's another man who will buy back the family out of whatever debt may have been, if there's another man who's prepared to restore Mahlon's name and Elimelech's name to the family line, then great. That's that's the point. And that would involve being a protector for Ruth and for Naomi, and uh, if he wasn't already married, taking her as his wife. Marriage context and background, again, different from our culture, but that means protection, it means security. Let him do it. So Boaz isn't taking advantage of this situation. If he's not willing to act as next of kin for you or kinsman redeemer, I slightly prefer that because it includes a lot of the meaning from Leviticus and Exodus of the Redeemer, the one who saves, protects, gives a name to. Now, yeah, I think you know me well enough, and I've hinted at this already. This is a foretaste of Christ as our Redeemer, who becomes kinsman redeemer as we are adopted as God's children, and we're given a new name, the name of Christian, Christ's people, and we belong to him, and we belong to a new and different line, and we have a new citizenship and security. And this is all foretaste of Christ's stuff, and it's really important, but it's also a lovely story. Lie down. I will act as next of kin for you if he won't. Kinsman redeemer. A bit of a mouthful for Hebrew word goel, but there we are. We need the mouthful to get hold of some of the background context from time of Moses. Lie down until the morning. Be rested, be safe, be calm. I will make sure you're looked after. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another. For he said, it must not be known that a woman came to the woman came to the threshing floor. He doesn't want her reputation damaged. It wouldn't damage his reputation, particularly if at all. He's the landowner and the farmer, and he's the boss. And in their world, as in ours, sometimes the important and the bosses can get away with things that others can't. Sadly, but that's how it is. But he doesn't want her to be seen as immoral, or as a woman who just goes and sleeps with a bunch of men and finds someone for the night. He doesn't want her to be seen in any way as immoral, inappropriate, unworthy. He's called her a worthy woman in verse 11. That's a lovely word full of meaning. He doesn't want her seen as unworthy. It mustn't be known the woman came to the threshing floor. He said to her, bring the cloak you're wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her back. Then he went into the town. We don't know, he's off to do business early. We don't know exactly how much 6 measures of barley was, but it was a measure would at least have been food for a family for a day, and possibly more than that. 6 measures, generous. There's only her and Naomi to look after. He went into the town. She came to her mother-in-law, who said, how did things go with you, my daughter? In a bit of trepidation, I imagine. Then she told her all that the man had done for her. He gave me these 6 measures of barley. He said, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Boaz isn't just thinking of Ruth, is he? He's thinking of Naomi. He's thinking of the one who, by marriage, is his relative, and probably of the same tribe and clan as Elimelech. That would have been normal, not very, very close relatives, but part of the same clan, the same village group within the bigger town. It's highly likely that Naomi was his relative as well as Elimelech, though they'd have been at least removed by what we would call a cousin relationship, and very probably more than that. But he's thinking about Naomi. Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. And she replies, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. She knows something about Boaz. He's a successful farmer. He's prosperous. We've been told that already. Chapter 2, verse 1, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. He's rich not by inheritance or such like. He's rich because he's a hard worker, and he's probably getting rich because he runs and manages his farm well. He looks after his workers and he makes sure his workers behave, but he also makes sure that the poor around are looked after by his men and women working in the fields. He's running a good business. It's a business, but we might almost call it in our terms a social enterprise too. He's seeking to do good to the community with his wealth, and he's prospering. And Naomi knows he isn't going to hang about. He will get this sorted. And we're told he set off, before it was light and went into town. He's ready to take action and do what needs doing, do what he can for not just Ruth, but for Ruth, for Naomi, and in Hebrew thinking, he's doing what he can for Elimelech and for Mahlon. He's going to find a way to maintain the family name and honor, and even to bring Ruth the Moabite, the Gentile, properly, fully, legally into the people of Israel. Um, she's been already honored by the people of Bethlehem because they've seen her behavior, her loyalty to Naomi, and they've sort of accepted her. But they've accepted her bluntly as one of the poor, but an honorable, worthy member of the poor. She goes gleaning in the fields. She has nothing of her own, and Naomi, it seems, has nothing or very little of her own, no income. She relies on Ruth. But Ruth has been accepted as worthy, as noble, as a foreigner, an alien, a Moabite. That's worse than many sorts of foreigners if you go back in the story. And yet, Boaz is prepared to find a way to redeem her, the foreign girl to whom legally he owes absolutely nothing, but for the sake of Naomi and Mahlon and Elimelech and the line. And Boaz is prepared either himself or to let someone else who has slightly more right to do it receive Ruth into not just his family, but his clan and his tribe and his people. Very powerful. Wait, for the man will not rest, but settle the matter today. So we must wait until next time. You probably know how the story ends, but it's worth going back at these things in these little bits of detail to see what God might be saying to us today. Chapter 4 next time. Bless you.